Welcome to PodApplaud, the Monday through Friday podcast that aims to enable your podcast habit. I'm your host, Seb, and today we are going to dive deep into the podcast, Deep into History. Deep into History is a history podcast, and a fantastic one at that. Arjun Hundal researches and presents the show, releasing a new episode every second week. If you end up craving more of the show, don't worry. There are additional episodes on the Patreon as well. Episodes usually extend past 45 minutes or so towards the hour mark. This is a relatively new podcast, so pace yourself, or you'll have binged all the currently released episodes and be stuck waiting for new releases, like me. I first stumbled on Deep into History via Twitter. Just a quick aside here. I want to say I never experienced Twitter until I started using it to connect with other podcasts. And the podcasting community on Twitter is so positive and supportive. Exactly the opposite of everything I had ever heard of about Twitter. Anyway, I gave Deep into History a shot, and I knew right away that I would want to share it on my show. Arjun's voice is the only voice you will hear on Deep into History, and he carries the show remarkably well with just his voice. There are no sound effects or musical cues, audio clips, or anything else. Just his voice. It is clear, pleasant, presents well, and engages the listener. I have no qualms about the audio at all. Only praise here. It's simple and it just works. Moving on, the scripts or content of the show are wonderfully written. The show constantly looks past history books and gets into the human elements of history. There are times history is a lot more complex than what we can observe in the present. And during the show, we are often introduced to seldom seen viewpoints. This isn't a typical dry history podcast. These stories are dynamic tales that are very well told. It is a storytelling podcast every bit as much as it is a history podcast. Often, the show looks upon conflicts and struggles of opposing nations, and the tension of these conflicts comes across really well in the show. Other times, such as the fantastic Yasuke episode, we are immersed in the history of a culture and the relationships that emerge within that culture. My favorite episode so far has been the episode Revenge of the Ice Queen. Isn't that title alone just so punchy? This episode details the struggle of Celtic Britons against the Roman invaders. We learn of how Roman legionnaires valiantly revered and respected their commander, how Celtic Britons fought back against subjugation, and the cultural differences and foul actions that stirred a complete and utter uprising. Every part of the tale won me over, and it reminded me that I have had an unread book kicking around for a couple years, A Brief History of the Druids by Peter Beresford Ellis. So not only did listening to Deep into History entertain and inform me for a solid hour over the course of the episode, but it also inspired me to finally pick up that book and continue learning on my own. Here on PodApplaud, I rate shows on a 1 to 5 scale. 1 is silence, 2 is a slow clap, 3 is applause, 4 is a round of applause, and 5, of course, is a standing ovation. I would give Deep into History a 5 out of 5 every time. The show is relatively new on the scene and absolutely nailing it. The show doesn't need bells or whistles. It is lean and effective. The show does exactly what it aims to. It dives into history and brings you the exciting tales you didn't even know you needed to hear. The show will definitely remain in my feed, and I will probably be listening to new episodes the day of release or as soon as possible. I would recommend the show to everyone. You don't have to be a history nut to enjoy this show. Like all great podcasts, books, or any other media, the efforts and passion of the creator are infectious and will make you care about things you didn't even know about before. That's been the show for today. I hope you found it valuable. If you wish to reach out or follow me, you can find me on Twitter at PodApplaud. That way, the next time I disappear on vacation for 2 weeks, you'll know about it. Or send an email to podapplaud@gmail.com. Thank you for listening, and please tune in again.